Hey guys, this is Zach with Next Tech, and this is my coverage of CES. On day 1 we went through floor 1 and 2 of the South Hall and Central Hall, and this is all the things that caught my eye walking around. The first thing I saw was a real-life Pong game, which was so freaking cool. Instead of being some retro console or classic console like so many companies are coming out with now, they came out with a real-life Pong game, where you had real paddles and a real square that bounced around. It was a really interesting take on a retro-style game. Next, we went to the VR Design Studio booth and tested out the car racing game. Here, you were able to control a car by just moving your hands like they were grabbing a steering wheel. They used a Kinect-like depth camera to judge who was controlling the car and which way you were steering, which was pretty cool to see. Last year at CES 2018, Razer made a huge keyboard, which was the new keyboard they were coming out with except like 10 times larger. This year, Hex Gear brought a huge keyboard to the show floor. It was really cool because it was an actual working keyboard and it had removable keycaps. The other product they had on display that I really liked was the Hex Gear's X1 wireless low-profile mechanical keyboard. They had a black one on display and it also comes in a white variant. I thought this was a super nice traveling keyboard for people who want a light, thin keyboard but still have mechanical switches. The next booth we checked out was the Aton booth, and my brother tried the Aton Model Y, which was a harness-like backpack thing that is designed to help people lift things without straining your back. At first they had my brother try lifting something without it being on, so he thought it didn't really work. But then they turned it on and it surprised him quite a bit.
Oh wow, that's actually right. It wasn't on. Is this on post? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I kind of just brings me up.
Next, we found the John Deere booth where they had a freaking massive tractor in this conference center, which made me think, how the hell do you get that into the building? We then ended up at Gigabyte's server booth. Here, they had a really cool submerged server, which from looking at it, I assumed it was submerged in mineral oil. However, after discussing it with a rep, he informed me it wasn't and showed me how the liquid felt after dipping $1 into the liquid. He wouldn't reveal what the liquid was, but judging by how quickly it dried and from the way it felt, it seemed like an alcohol-based liquid. The idea is that with this liquid, the servers are still easily serviceable since the liquid dries almost instantly when the server is pulled out, which definitely is not the case with mineral oil. Mineral oil just makes a mess. The next booth we ended up in was Inwin's booth, and as usual, they had some really cool cases on display. One case had a wireless charger baked into the top of the case, which is certainly useful if you have a phone that supports it. Another case was about the most gaudy case I've ever seen. It looked like someone puked RGB all over it. Then, in the center of the booth, they had this super unique case that was essentially a piece of art with a PC in the middle of it. We then made it over the DJI booth where they were showing off a gimbal for heavy cinema cameras like the Red cameras, and it was wireless, so one person could just hold the gimbal and the other person would actually be pointing the camera at the desired subjects. After the DJI booth, we ended up walking up to Dr. Fugees' booth. This year, he was showing off some sort of vibrating thing that you stood on. We all had to try it. Kyle, I'm trying to hold the camera steady. After goofing off, we all got a little more serious again and ended up in the Insta360 booth. Here they were showing off a new 360 camera that had 6 cameras and was designed to be worn on your back, which looked a little goofy but created some really cool footage. The last booth we checked out in the South Hall was the Razer booth. Here they had their new gaming monitor on display, which was a beautifully designed monitor. I love the way it tilts back to access the I/O, and the cable management is excellent, but it is a little expensive for my taste. They also had their new case on display, which has 2 hydraulic lifts for each side panel. Very interesting design, and I loved how stealth the display model was. We then moved on to the North Hall, where we ended up at the Qualcomm booth. As far as the products were concerned, I didn't see anything interesting, but they had a really cool display that was supposed to teach you about 5G.
A single spark, a breakthrough that sets the stage for everything. It all starts with 5G, and it all starts here with Qualcomm.
Next, we ended up at the Sony booth. I was hoping for a new camera, but instead Sony announced a new extra large TV format. They basically just created a massive, super high density video wall out of small video tiles about the size of a phone. They called it the Crystal LED display system, and trust me, it looked better in person than it does on video. Right after Sony, we made our way over to the Samsung booth, and man, Samsung really went all out this year. Their booth looked amazing, and they had some sweet things to see. The first thing I saw was a monitor I would love to have for my desk back at the studio. It was a 1440p 49-inch super ultra-wide screen that I could just imagine replacing my 3 monitors back in the studio with. Then we saw the star of day one show. Samsung also created a new extra large TV format this year, just like Sony's. But we couldn't help but notice how much better it looked than Sony's. It looked stunning. It was also made with a similar tiling setup as Sony's, so the idea is that it can be sized to any size or aspect ratio you want without ever losing resolution, because obviously the bigger it gets, the more tiles it gets. Finally, to finish off the day, we went to the Panasonic booth, and they had some cool things to see as well. They were demonstrating a mapping technique which could tell how fast things were moving. In their demo, you could swing this wand thing and the sensor would pick it up, and then they would take that data and tell you on the screen behind it how fast the wand was moving, and the screen showed a trail of the wand's movements. Overall, day 1 of CES went great. Stay tuned for day 2. This is Zach with Next Tech. See ya!